What's happening, guys? Today we're going to be going over inspections. Now, if you've ever received an order that's damaged or defective or just not what you paid for, you will know the pain of foregoing inspections. Today, I'm lucky enough to have Sajag from MOVLEY join us and start explaining a little bit about why it's so important to do inspections when you source from China. This is a guy who's lived continuously in China for 6 months at one point, been there multiple times like myself, and I really enjoyed discussing some of these things with him. For example, is there a lot of bribery in China? Why is there such a difference between sample quality and final product quality? And he's also going to explain his opinion on Alibaba partnered inspectors and kind of the drawbacks there, and even with trade assurance, which I think you're going to find really interesting. We're also going to cover what are the most common problems that he sees in orders, because he obviously inspects a ton of orders. This is what his company actually does, is inspections. So I think you're going to learn a lot from that, and more than just understanding MOVLEY and how that service can help you with your business, you're also going to learn a lot about China, Chinese suppliers, and the cultural differences there. We're even going to be discussing things like NDAs and if those are even worth doing for you as a seller. I think you're really going to enjoy this one. So let's jump in. So welcome, Sajag. Very happy to have you here. And for those of you watching, Sajag actually runs a company called MOVLEY, and they're specifically involved with inspections, with making sure sellers like yourself get what they've paid for. Sajag's also someone who's been in China for like a 6-month stint and been there multiple times like myself. So I'm also interested to chat with him and share with you what we found being in China. What is the culture like? What are manufacturers really like? And then speak more about what his business finds in terms of inspecting orders, when to inspect orders, when is most important, what to look for, and ultimately how much that can save you in the long run. So Sajag has a cool story on that, on why, although it's a bit of extra cost now in the short term, it can actually save you massively over the long term. So Sajag, welcome to the channel. Thank you for being here today. And if you just want to introduce yourself to the sellers and just let them know a bit about, what MOVLEY actually can do for them.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much for having me on, Dan. And to everybody listening, I hope this podcast will be super, super valuable to everybody. So just a quick note about me. So I'm just a regular guy, and I actually started off playing Minecraft and doing that out of my parents' basement. And then I moved into flipping stuff on eBay, and then just happened to bump into Amazon. And started at my Amazon brand like 5 years ago. And it grew super, super quick. So our first year we did 40K, second year we did 1 million, third year we did we were on track to do 2 million that year. But we just started having a lot of quality control problems with some suppliers we worked with for a very long time. We were doing inspections on all of our products. We were getting past inspections, even though we were having defective issues. And then ended up having to shut down that brand just because of quality control problems after, with our ongoing manufacturers and with some of our new manufacturers who weren't as lucky. So that's actually what led me into founding MOVLEY, and that's what we do. MOVLEY helps brands do quality control inspections in China, and we do them way differently and way better than any other company out there. Now, we're not going to be perfect, but I'd say we're about 2 to 3 times more effective than the industry average, the next best competitor. And we're hoping to get to a 10x level in the next year or two with some really cool tech and stuff like that that's coming up.
Awesome. And then I wanted to ask you a bit more about why inspections are so important, specifically when sourcing from China. And if you can speak a bit about what you find manufacturers sometimes do on orders, like do they cut corners? I know you've mentioned fraud and bribery and these types of things, and sellers are really interested in that. They want to at least know what to look for. Because there are big differences in culture, but also like business culture between different regions of the world. So if you could just speak about that and why inspections are so important when sourcing from China.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a really, really good question. So in a general sense, a lot of sellers have this misconception that, hey, if I get my first order inspected, first order comes out good, a second order is going to be fine. And that's really not far from the truth. So in like my case, for example, we were working with our suppliers for 2 years. And then we started having a lot of quality control problems all of a sudden. And with other customers we've had, you can have a consistent quality fade, which happens a little bit every single order because essentially it's a game. The factory wants to produce the lowest quality product that you will buy. Keep buying the product, they keep lowering the quality, and then eventually it goes really, really bad after a few orders. So we've had issues with that. There's been issues where we've talked to people, and I've talked to people, and it's not on the gradual changes all of a sudden on like the second order. Sometimes it's on the 10th order, sometimes it's on the second order, it's on the third order, and sometimes you just get bad orders from order number one. So there's really a huge variance. And the calculation that really kind of shined my eyes into kind of the light, kind of really brought me into the light was that when we actually did a calculation. So say you have like a $10,000 order. Now, a $10,000 order for some sellers might be a lot. For other sellers, it's not that much. But it applies regardless of how big your order is. Say you have a 20 to 30% defect rate on a $10,000 order. That's about a $3,000 in products, and that's not all you're losing. When you count in freight costs, product costs, the shipping costs, the packaging costs, getting it over to the customer, and then the customer service costs, costs to actually ship new products to the customer, lost profit on returns. Start calculating all those different expenses. And we actually did a basic calculation, which says, you're doing 4 orders a year, one every 3 months. You would actually be able to pay for all your inspections for 7 years, just from one bad order, be it the second order or the 10th order, just from, the losses on that one order.
And then Sajag, I want to speak a little bit about trade assurance as well as Alibaba's partnered inspectors, because I think a lot of sellers go with those options. And that's where I think they gain that safety net, in their minds in terms of, this will be okay. Or, even if I just have trade assurance, I should be protected. But I want you to just speak about those two, having a lot of experience with them. Number one, trade assurance and your thoughts on that. And two, on Alibaba's partnered inspectors, the 3 that they offer.
Yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts on Alibaba. I'm sure, Dan, you know that very well from our previous conversations. So Alibaba Trade Assurance is an interesting thing. So once you send the money, you've lost 100% of your financial leverage because all the money is in escrow. And the problem with Alibaba Trade Assurance, like we've had customers who've done transactions through Alibaba Trade Assurance, and then they go do an inspection and it's completely failed. And then they go talk with Alibaba, and they have no way to get their money back because Alibaba is like, well, according to the contract, according to whatever we have specified here, the products are fine. You're just doing you, and we can't help you. And at other times, what happens is if Alibaba wants to like actually refund you the money, a lot of times, and I think this is actually in their policy, they ask the sellers to use their own inspection services. They say you have to use an Alibaba inspection service and get a fail on that result for it to like go against trade assurance. Now, the problem with Alibaba inspection services is if you go to their website and you just check the table on their website, which talks about inspections and what they do, they literally say on their website that, yeah, we'll check maybe 100 units or 500 units or whatever for workmanship. Workmanship essentially is a fancy way of saying visually look at them. Basically, they're just looking at your product. They're like, yeah, this looks good. There's no scratches. It's all cool here. And if you have an electronic, you don't plug it in, they will actually do that on maybe 3 units. They literally say it on their website, 1 unit for function test, or maybe 3 units, doesn't go above that for the most part, maybe 1 unit for conformity test, or 10 units if you get a bigger thing. So if you have a 20% defect rate, which is huge, that should not pass. Every time you pick a unit, you have a probability of 80% of getting a working unit. So you pick 3 working units, boom, your inspection passed. And that's the end of the day there. So, with every product, whether you're doing like paper cups, you want to make sure the paper cups hold their liquid, they hold water, they don't leak. You want to make sure that if you have a wooden shelf that it holds its weight, or if you have a general product, maybe it snaps together, it works in a certain way. You want to test that on every unit and say, hey, this product functions as intended. And if you're only checking 3 units, it's effectively systematically built to pass your products, those inspection criteria. And they put pretty good names on it. So I was surprised to kind of figure that out. But that when I started diving deeper into that, it was absolutely ridiculous. And that's where one thing that MOVLEY does very differently is we don't play around with those kind of things at all. We give you a fully customizable spec, And when you tell us, hey, we want you to check this function, we'll check it on all the units or exactly how many ever units you specify if you want less. So that makes a huge difference because you need to properly and thoroughly check your products. So yeah.
Awesome. And then on the trade assurance side, I've used trade assurance multiple times, and I think a lot of sellers will still go with that route or that path to payment. Is there anything you would advise in terms of using trade assurance wisely?
Yeah, so I personally don't use trade assurance, so I wouldn't be able to advise on that. But what I really advise, like everybody that I speak to, is when you send your money, 100% of your financial leverage, your leverage is gone, and it's in the hands of somebody that you don't want it to be in the hands of. All right, you want that final control. So what I always tell people that are doing small orders, just starting out, or even bigger orders, is do a standard 30 to 70 terms on wire transfer. Send a 30% payment on the deposit. Let them produce the products. Let them check the products, form that relationship, set expectations clearly. And then if something goes wrong, you have the 70% or you drop the order. And that way you can kind of retain your ownership. Obviously, you have to do a little bit of due diligence to make sure, the Chinese company exists, the bank account exists, things like that. That's where factory audits become really useful. But in a general sense, as long as you've done that due diligence, that makes way more sense than using trade assurance.
I 100% agree. Always do payment terms of 30/70. Sometimes you can even get better terms than that. So definitely shop around on that. And then you just mentioned factory audits, which I think a lot of sellers will be interested in. Is that something you can also offer?
Yeah, so right now we have a beta program for factory audits that is out. So we are doing them. It's not released to production because we're actually testing a upgraded version of our factory audit. So that's why it's in beta. The basic version is good to go. So we priced it at the same price as the basic, and we're doing the extended version. But yeah, that's definitely something we can help with.
A lot of sellers often talk about getting a really high quality sample, and then the main order, those units are nothing like that sample or just of a lower quality. Can you talk a little bit about that, and specifically reference samples? That's something you've spoken with me about, and how perhaps reference samples are actually a better way of ensuring you get what you paid for.
Yeah, definitely 100%. So when you have a product, a lot of people think, okay, I got a good sample, I have a good suppliers, end of story. That's not necessarily the case because production units can be very different from the samples. So in a general sense, what you can do when it comes to reference samples is if you're doing an inspection on your product and you're really happy with the sample, you can actually send that sample to like us, for example, and we can take that to the factory, or we ship it to the factory in advance and then put in a tamper evidence seal. So when the inspector gets to the factory, they check for that reference sample that, okay, hey, it's sealed up, it's correct, maybe it's signed by you on the product itself. And then you can actually use that and compare that to the production units. And that makes a huge difference, especially if you're like testing for weights, you're testing for quality, maybe a texture, maybe a color. It makes a really, really big difference on the inspection. And it's highly recommended to do that. And it can really make sure the inspector, because the inspector only has enough information as you provide them. So if you don't provide them the information or you don't give them something to look at or compare to, then, as far as they're concerned, they might be looking at a dollar store comb that's going to be sold in the dollar store, even if it's a luxury comb that's going to be sold on Amazon for $20. They don't know what they're looking at.
And then let's say I set up an inspection with you and I tell my supplier I'm having an inspection done. Well, the first thing there is, when do you recommend you tell the supplier you're going to have an inspection done? But secondly here, is that supplier going to perform differently knowing that we're going to have an inspection done?
That's a really, really good question. So two things with that. So first of all, with when to tell the supplier, best time to tell the supplier is before you've even placed the order. And just kind of work it in. Don't say it like really, really formally, like, hey, we're going to be doing an inspection at this place and this place. Just be like really casual about it. Yeah, we'll probably send a couple of inspectors. We might do an inspection during production. We'll do an inspection after production. We'll probably do a couple of inspections, or at least one on this order. Just kind of throw it in a general email, just conversationally. That's one of the best ways, to do it, and do it right at the beginning. And to answer your second question, what was your second question again? I have a pretty short one.
Well, Sajag, I actually want to dig into that a bit more.
Yeah.
Why would you not tell them it more formally or more, in a more direct manner or a more kind of warning tone? Why would you avoid that and make it more conversational?
Yeah. So the reason you want to make it more conversational is because you don't want to make it sound like it's a big deal. Like, hey, this is something they should have already expected. And this is something that's an industry normal. So, we have customers that do it really formally. They're like, hey, we will do a inspection. And then the supplier will get back super formally as well. Yes, you can do a level 2 inspection. And then the client's like, okay, sure. And then they're restricted now to a level 2 inspection. What if they want to do a level 3? What if they want to do a reinspection? It's their personal rights with any manufacturer to be able to check your products however you like before production or before buying them. So why restrict your rights? Keep it super casual, like you know what you're doing. It's a basic thing, like they're expecting it, we're expecting it, because any major buyer, any major seller will be doing inspections. So if you know what you're doing, you're going to be doing an inspection regardless. It's just kind of a blatant fact. So just kind of make it obvious to them. Yeah, we're going to be doing our inspections, of course, and keep it super conversational. And actually, to answer your second question, which is what I was getting into, why you don't want to keep it super formalized also, because you don't want to tell them, you do not generally want to tell them everything you're going to do in the inspection, like super detailed, because a lot of times what you're looking at the inspection is you're looking at symptoms, you're not looking at the root cause. So you definitely want to dig into the root cause as much as possible. Like, hey, is this product going to last? Is this product going to be built properly? But like, for example, maybe a product has a lot of loose threads. And that means that the machine was not calibrated properly. So maybe this product is not like knitted properly. Let's say, it has a weave to it and it's not been woven properly. If you tell them, hey, we're going to be checking for loose threads in our inspection, and you make it super formal, then they're going to just have a factory person go up and cut all the loose threads. And then you're going to go check your products and you're going to be like, wow, it looks all good. And then, you could have missed a sign, because if you had the inspector there, you would have seen all these loose threads and you would have been like, maybe this product was not made properly. There's way too many loose threads for then what it was worth. So maybe this product might be a little bit loose. So that's where you can kind of game the inspection process a little bit. But obviously you can do a lot of root cause tests as well. So that's something that, you definitely want to do to, make sure your inspection is good, like weight tests, destruction tests, wear and tear tests, things like that. But in a general sense, you just want to keep it super casual. So the company doesn't feel like, hey, this is a formal approach. It's like, I'm expecting you to build good products and I'm just happening to check them. It's not like I'm using this check as an insurance to the fact that you're building good products, which is kind of what you're doing anyways.
Okay. And then in terms of, now the supplier knows, I've introduced it conversationally, but they know an inspection is going to be done. Do you find suppliers perform differently in that situation? Like, will they create a higher quality product knowing an inspection's coming, or do they generally just go by their normal standards in terms of quality?
Yeah, so this is really, really interesting. So a lot of times the company might be, trying to get their inspector situated before the production even happens. Like, hey, yeah, you're doing an inspection. Here's a company. Please let us know what company you're working with. And that's when, they're kind of like, okay, hey, we want to back down a little bit. We want to, how detailed do we want to get on this order? So they're kind of, feeling for it. So that can be a little bit of an issue, a red flag. They shouldn't care what inspection company or even ask you before the production. Maybe they're truly caring, they just want to figure it out and arrange everything. But generally, that's not something they really care about. So if they're asking those questions, it's kind of weird. Yeah. The second thing is that there's really a lot of things that go into the inspection. So when we're actually looking into the actual inspection process, most people, like most factories, are not too worried about the inspection process, because aside from visual defects, they don't really look at anything else. So it's not something that really makes them perform a ton better, but it's definitely something that, encourages them to work a little bit better. But if you give them some indications that you're going to be a little bit more thorough, like in that casual process, like, hey, yeah, we're going to check all the units. Of course, we want to make sure that, the shelves support their weight, it's built properly. We're going to, just casually say it like that and kind of indicate that, hey, yeah, we're going to be going into like some more details. It's not just going to be a super like high level overview. Then it can encourage the factories to kind of work and think a little bit bigger. But otherwise, like, if you're using Alibaba inspection services, for example, they don't really care. It's just a visual look. They'll cut a couple of threads and it's going to pass.
Excellent. And then when you've obviously done a lot of inspections at this point, what do you find to be the most common problem in those inspections of sellers' orders? And I know it's probably really varied, but just, a common problem you find, or a couple of them with different types of products, just so people know what they could expect to be wrong with their orders. Say they're just a brand new seller, what types of things generally go wrong or would cause an order to fail?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So, first of all, any failure of wear and tear tests. So if you have a wear and tear test on your product and it fails, it doesn't hold its weight or whatever, that should fail the entire inspection. A second thing is visual tests. So if you have too many visual defects or too many problems, then it can go over the AQL, which stands for acceptable quality limits. So those are generally preset by the inspection company. You don't really have to worry about it, but you do want to clarify to the inspection company, like this is something we have in our booking form, that, hey, this is a major defect for us. This is a minor defect for us. This is a critical defect. Critical defects meaning you can't even sell the product. So you kind of classify your defects, and then there's a threshold for visual defects. The third thing that's actually super common, which is something that actually not a lot of people think about, is actually carton drop tests. So this is something we do standard on all of our tests, and we actually use a specification. I think it's called like IS something. And we have a spec where we actually drop this carton depending on its size and weight, like X number of times from X height or Y height. And then we check inside the box and make sure the products are not damaged. And a lot of factories refuse this test. It's actually, out of anything in our inspection that gets refused, our customers, like sometimes, and with our recommendations, we get super granular with the tests, and the factory doesn't care about those tests. We're like, yeah, do whatever you want. But then when we do the carton drop tests, we're like, no, we're not going to do this. And I always like to say, like, that essentially is meant to simulate like very basic shipping damage. When you go to the airport, they're throwing the bags into the plane. It's like a 6 feet throw. Like those guys should be in professional sports. So imagine what's going through when it's going through the DHL center or the UPS center when you're shipping that carton. They're throwing that thing conveyor to conveyor to conveyor. And your products are going to break if they can't even pass a carton drop test, which is a really basic version that we do as well. So that's a really common reason that a lot of inspections fail.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I was talking to a seller just like 2-3 days ago, and they received units back from Amazon, like a removal order, and the cartons were just, some of them were open, some of them had been like ripped open, like completely damaged, and some of the units even damaged inside. So I think what we do in our minds is we see the cartons all perfectly packed. Sometimes you ask your supplier to send you an image before shipping, and you think it's going to, go through the whole process like that, arrive like that. But as you say, those things get thrown around properly. So I think that's a very good test as well. And then on the same topic, Sajag, what is the weirdest problem or, error you found in an order, like the most strange scenario you've come across, which has led to an order failing?
That's a really good question. I don't think there's like anything like super, super strange. But like there has been like some pretty like blatant failures. Like sometimes like, we had like, we did an inspection one time for like paper cups for one of our clients, and the paper cups leaked. So, what is the purpose of having a cup if it just leaks water? You know what I mean? Like selling buckets with holes. So that was kind of, a little bit ridiculous. Oh, the weirdest thing actually is masks. So we inspected about 20,000 KN95 masks. These were high tech. These were not like the cheap ones you buy at gas stations. These were class 2 FDA certified medical grade KN95 masks that were going to a hospital to be used with COVID positive patients. Okay. And we inspected this order of 20,000 masks, and we found out that about 10% of the units had literally just holes in them, just holes in the mask from an FDA certified supplier. And we went and talked to the manufacturer, and then the manufacturer gave us some excuse. These were all ready to go. They're ready to be packed. They're ready to ship. Then they went back and said, oh, you did the inspection too early. We were going to like remove those and da. And then we looked at some of their other orders we had some recommendations from them, referrals from other people buying those masks. We looked at their orders also, and we found out that they also had 10% holes. So that was actually the strangest and kind of the weirdest thing. It's like you're selling masks in a pandemic, and you're an FDA certified class 2 facility, and you're selling masks with 10% holes in them. Like, what are the morals that relate to actually getting those products to the market?
Crazy. We definitely saw some crazy things in our industry regarding that whole new development. And then, so let's say I'm watching this as a newer seller, or even I'm just newer to inspections. If I come sign up with Movley, what can I expect? Like, how many units can I ask you to check in my order? Let's say I have a 600 unit order. How many units can you check for me? What are my options there? And what are the associated costs as well?
Yeah, this is a really good question. So we're actually one of the only inspection companies that actually bill on the basis of time. So it's not like we just throw you a number and we're like, yeah, this is how much it took, pay us now. We quote you in advance. We have a bill on maximum time guarantee. And if it's less, we credit you. But what essentially happens is that, we actually have to estimate the exact time of the inspection. So if you have a very complex product, you're doing a lot of thorough tests on that product, it's going to take a lot more time than if you're doing a very simple product with a couple of units. So we bill on the basis of the day. And so if we do a one-man day inspection, we can do, let's say, 200 units or 300 units, maybe just visually, but or maybe even more than that, maybe like 500 units just visually, depending on the product. But if you start getting into really complex product tests, like, hey, open up this product, check it, make sure, count how many pieces there are. Like, there's a box of 100 pieces of this, utensil or whatever, sit down and count each one of those pieces. Then it starts dramatically increasing in time. So it really depends on how thorough you want to get with your inspection. But in a general sense, you can do a really strong inspection in just one day for most orders. At least level 1, level 2 inspection. And then if you want to do a proper like level 3 inspection, which is kind of what we recommend for Amazon sellers, then at that point, generally we can do it for a lot of products in a day, but some other products, you're doing very extensive testing, you're going thorough, which you should be, then it might take around 2 days.
Okay, perfect. And then what is the rate for that day or those 2 days?
Yeah, so we charge on the basis of the man day, and we charge 302 per man day. And we're fairly transparent on our costs. So a lot of people have this misconception that labor in China costs $3 to $5 an hour. And that's really not the case. So a well-trained bilingual inspector actually earns between $13 to $19 an hour. And then in addition to that, you also have the costs for travel costs, you have transport costs, you have accommodation costs, you have administrative costs, hiring a back office, for example, in China. Hiring well-paid bilingual speakers is around $30 an hour so that speak really good English to translate the requirements. Plus fraud and bribery auditing costs, plus the cost of training, and then obviously a margin for the inspection company as well. So we're fairly transparent about that. We make a pretty small margin per inspection. We work more so on volumes, but we charge 302 per day.
Perfect. And those of you who are interested, maybe you haven't planned this yet, or you want to do an inspection on your next order, perhaps your first order, you can check out the link in the description below. You'll find Movley there. You guys can go learn a bit more there and specifics depending on your type of product, or how many units you're doing, or how in depth you want to go with your inspection.
5 minutes later.
Do you suggest that sellers inspect their first order and then they can relax a little bit, or do you advise that they inspect all orders going forward, or how many of them? And then the last part, and I'll repeat this at the end for you, but at what point during that order should I tell Movley get ready for their inspection?
That's a loaded question. So yeah, the first thing with relaxing, your first order, generally, there is a high risk because in 60% of the orders that we've seen, it's either a hit or a miss. So it's a hit, you have everything great, wonderful, or it's a miss. And when it's a miss, it's like a pretty bad miss. It's like a huge defect rate, or maybe the color is wrong, or maybe the product doesn't fit or work properly, and it's across all the units. So generally, to kind of accommodate for that risk, what I generally recommend is doing a during production inspection on your first order. And do that about 20% of production completion. So you can actually see your products off the production line, make sure everything's good before the rest of the products get produced. And then you also want to do a pre-shipment inspection. So that's one way to kind of mitigate the risk a little bit. And with that first inspection, you might do those 2 inspections. You might also get a little bit more thorough with your pre-shipment inspection. So generally what's recommended for an ongoing level of inspections is about level 3. So you want to stick to a level 3 on a general inspection. And then do that on every single order you do. That first order, you might go a little bit beyond level 3, but use level 3 as kind of a baseline if you're selling on Amazon specifically. Level 2 is kind of what Target, Walmart, those guys will force you to do. So that's kind of what I generally recommend when it comes to those first inspections. But you do want to be doing inspections every order, because that's kind of where the whole concept of inspections really saves you money, because it could be that second order, it could be that 10th order, or it could be a gradual shift. You want to notate that, keep track of that, and then use that as a baseline to say, okay, hey, we're having problems, we need to switch suppliers, or hey, we had a lot of defects in this order, let's fix this before it gets to your customers. And that's what saves you a ton of money in the long run.
Perfect. And then while that order is being manufactured, at what point do I tell MOVLEY, hey, get ready to inspect?
Yeah, so in terms of inspecting, the best practices is to actually tell MOVLEY to get ready to inspect at least a week or two before the production is supposed to be completed. Or if you're just starting production and you want to do it during production inspection, I'd recommend starting that process maybe simultaneously while working with your supplier and saying, hey, yeah, we're going to start production. When is the production line going to start? When is the production line going to end? We want to do it during production inspection, maybe on the first day of production or whatnot, and then coordinate with us at the same time. So you kind of time that at the same time. So that's what I would generally recommend.
Awesome. And then knowing a lot of Chinese manufacturers and companies, what's your opinion on working with a trading company versus working with the end manufacturer? And which one would you recommend to sellers, and why?
That's a really good question. So when you work with a trading company, you kind of lose a little bit of control with your products, and you're adding a middleman to the mix. So when you work with the manufacturer, you have control, you can customize the product. When you do an inspection, you say, hey, this product is made wrong. You can work directly with the factory, and the factory will be the one fixing the products, getting everything done. But what happens is when you work with a trading company, specifically with quality control problems, is that if you run into quality issues or whatnot, then you have to tell the trading company. And now the trading company built a margin into this product, right? So then they have to go take it back to the manufacturer, maybe ship it back to the manufacturer and say, hey, I know our contract said this, but like our customer won't accept these goods. Can you fix them? And then the factory might give the trading company a hard time. Like, you told me this, you told me this, you told me this. Like, we're going to charge you more. Then the trading company has to fight with them. And then the trading company ends up fighting with you. And regardless, through this entire process, you've added a ton of delays as they're kind of negotiating the battle on who's going to pay to fix those goods.
2,000 years later.
And at the end, you may not even get the goods fixed. The trading company might just tell you, yep, this is how it is, end of story. So it really depends. I'm not the biggest fan of working with trading companies, but there's definitely like times where it becomes useful. Like, really the best time working with trading companies is if you're like doing a generic product, maybe you're just adding your logo to it, and this product is produced and you have a very high MOQ and you don't need that high of an MOQ. You can buy it from a trading company, which, might buy 10,000 units, and they might give you 1,000 units from that order at a, pretty decent rate. So that's when working with the trading company makes a lot of sense. But aside from that, I'm not the biggest fan in a usual case.
Okay. And then another question sellers often ask, or another area where sellers have differing opinions, is in approaching suppliers. So a lot say I should approach the supplier as the kind of CEO of my company. Some say you should approach them as the purchasing agent of a company. In terms of that, do you have any advice for sellers on what approach is best? And it doesn't have to be one of those, but what's the best way to approach suppliers? And then also, once you've established the relationship, are there any do's and don'ts with your Chinese suppliers? How do you get suppliers on your side? If we just talk a little bit more about the cultural differences there.
Definitely. So at the end of the day, you're going to meet with your suppliers, you're going to work with these suppliers for a long time. And it's really about building a relationship. So if you go tell your suppliers, hey, I'm a purchasing agent, or I'm some low-level employee in the company, and then you go meet them, I'm the founder, it just sets the relationship off on a bad foot because you're going to be the one signing contracts and whatnot. So, you're clearly not a low-level purchasing agent or whatever. So frankly, I don't think how you introduce as your position really matters, but I think a lot of other stuff goes into it. So what I always like to do when I approach suppliers is I go talk to them and I give them a little bit, maybe a PowerPoint on the company, which just says, okay, hey, this is a little bit about my company. This is what we do. These are our customers. This is where we sell. This is what we're looking to get into in the future. And, this is what we look for in our suppliers. and, keep it really professional, because when you have a deck like that prepared, ready to go, then it means that, hey, I'm talking to a lot of suppliers and we really want to build a relationship with you, because, we're giving you all our intro on the entire company. And then, working with whoever you're speaking with, the sales rep, whatever, introducing the company, kind of walking them through that pitch and saying, okay, hey, these are the products we're looking to do. Your company specializes in this. We'd love to kind of talk if we can work together and, do this. And really just about building that relationship. In China, and really any country actually in supply chain for the most part, is very relationship based. So forming a relationship with that supplier, talking with them, giving them an intro to that company, to your company, makes a big, big difference. And then when you get into pricing, when you get into customization, you be transparent. Hey, we're just starting out, but we expect this to do X volumes, X volumes, X volumes. My background is in this. It's kind of like you're pitching an investor, because essentially they're almost like investing in your business, right? They're getting a 30% deposit from you. They're building a whole order. They're hoping you know what you're doing. And if you blindside them, you don't know what you're doing, you start wanting a refund or whatever, you get cold feet, then frankly they're going to lose a lot of money just entertaining you for that time period. It's not a lossless transaction for them. It's a business. So kind of making sure that, hey, what you're doing, and you kind of show it to them and show that you're willing to work with them, and that it's not like you're coming to them and just like, hey, you're just one of the 50 suppliers. Hey, we actually want to get to know your company. We want to get to know you. Tell us about yourself. Tell us about your company. What does your company want to do in the future? You open up those conversations. Then you open it up as a partner. So come at it from a partnership angle.
I love it. And, I think what I don't want to do as well in this interview is, it's very easy for us to come across as negative towards Chinese manufacturers, suppliers. And I don't want that to be the case at all here, because it isn't the case. You are going to have some bad apples in places, and people who cut corners. But in my experience, working with Chinese suppliers specifically has been amazing, like incredible people to work with.
Yes.
Often better to work with than some Western companies, genuinely. Just recently, I had a big problem with an order where that entire order needed to be changed with an emblem or a logo. And having done a lot of orders with this supplier, we are, as you say, Sajag, like business partners on this. He knows if he makes this tough for me, it's going to impact my business, my profits, and ultimately reorders and his profitability. And so what he did is he did this change entirely for free. He's also done all the storage, while this has been happening, for free. And so it really is a great way to source products, and you are going to find incredible business partners in China for sure. What Sajag and I are discussing today really mustn't put you off sourcing from China. We're just showing you how to make sure that you're partnering with the right people in China. But thank you for that, Sajag. And then the next thing I wanted to touch on here is NDAs. A lot of people speak about NDAs, and, I've got this amazing product idea. I don't want anyone stealing it. I want to produce it, but I don't want them taking my idea. So I'm going to get an NDA done, a non-disclosure agreement. Now, do NDAs hold any water in China? And what's your experience on that? If they don't, what do you recommend to a seller in that position where they don't want their idea to be, replicated?
Yeah, that's definitely a really good question. So just to go back on your previous point real quick, yes. So in China, you will work with some of the best manufacturers, and you'll work with some really awesome people. And don't take that as a discouragement. There's a lot that goes into Chinese manufacturing. This is just kind of your hygiene factors to make sure, you know what to do, how to come across, and things like that, and then implement that into your production. NDAs, to be honest, they don't really work, just to be frank. So a lot of people think, hey, by making them sign an NDA and going through this really drawn out process, you come across as a bigger company and it looks more professional. But in reality, you're kind of setting yourself up to look like an idiot, because these Chinese companies know that the NDAs are not enforceable. They know that your agreements are not enforceable. So they're ready to sign whatever. That's why your sales agent signs the agreement. If it was like a real agreement, the boss would sign it and they would chop it, they would seal it. It would go through this long process. If you want a contract that's actually enforceable in China, you have to shell out a lot of money. Those attorneys charge between like $800 to sometimes $2,000, $3,000 an hour. You're talking about like 10 grand to get like a simple contract put together in Chinese and English for your business. So like what you would need to actually protect your IP and whatnot is like an NNN agreement, which is like a non-compete, non-circumvention, and one other non-something. So that's what you kind of need to actually put that together. And if you're going to get a proper agreement that's enforceable, that's going to be like 10 grand. And then when you get that to a supplier and you send it up and you put it in front of their face, we need you to sign this, chop this, seal this, and go through this entire process. Then they're going to start having a lot of cold feet, even if it's the same thing that they previously signed before, because they know that, okay, this is enforceable. You kind of know what you're doing. So what I always like to say is that don't make yourself look stupid by going after them saying, hey, sign this NDA, sign all these agreements and manufacturing contracts, and then put all the legal jargon in there, like, hey, yeah, we're going to jurisdiction is in US courts or whatever, because you just look stupid. But what you can do is you can put together a very basic agreement and just say, okay, hey, this is what we expect from you. This is what I expect from you. This is what you can expect from me. This is what our general agreement is. We're going to buy these many products. This is what you're going to do. And it's built on that relationship, that partnership level trust. And then you can have them sign it, like, okay, hey, let's both get this on the same page. You sign this, I sign this. We're on the same page. We're aligned. But that contract is not going to be enforceable. And even if you get an enforceable contract, those cost tens of thousands of dollars to litigate. If they cost 5, 10K to make, it costs a lot more to litigate. So don't expect to actually do that. So if you have a really
15 minutes later,
really high tech idea, you don't want the supplier to steal it. The unfortunate truth when it comes to Chinese manufacturing is work with a good supplier, kind of set forth expectations and whatnot. But that is a huge risk that you will be taking, working with any overseas manufacturer in any country, because the IP laws are not the best when it comes to those kind of things.
For sure. And I think it comes back to relationship in a lot of cases. You could do the NNN agreement if you, let's say, have a lot of capital, a huge idea, you're going to do massive production runs. Maybe you've done a focus group test, some market testing, you have market research, you're going to go big with it. But I do believe a lot of small sellers should rely more on relationship. And with the NDA, that can almost be a reduction in the trust that you have in the relationship, So in this case, I would look more at the relationship, something I do, and it might seem a little bit like, airy fairy, but if you explain to your supplier as a business partner that if you keep us exclusive, we can do more sales because we have less competitors. And then what's going to happen is we get more sales. We have investors on the sidelines. We're going to put more and more money into this, do bigger orders, and you're going to have massive reorders in the future. By, not being exclusive with us and sharing the idea, doing this with others, there's going to be a lot of competition in the market, which is going to then reduce prices of all the products in the market. And that's going to put a lot of pressure on us in terms of profitability and squeezing you on the cost so we can remain profitable. So speaking a bit about that with the supply can also help, as well as exclusivity agreements. And I'm not talking about legal agreements, I'm talking about just agreements between you and the supplier. So it might be that they create and develop products in this niche, and your business also sells products in this niche. And perhaps you exclusively source your other products you're going to do also from them. So they're getting a bit of exclusivity there and more orders, and you obviously have exclusivity on your product idea, hopefully. But a lot of that does come down to trust. But I like that you explained the NNN as well. For those who want like that legal binding document, you can also do that, but it's going to be quite expensive, as Sajag said. And Sajag, let's say I'm getting an inspection done. How do I know exactly what to check for with my product? Are there steps involved, or what do you recommend for a seller who's unsure what the inspector should actually check for? What are some signs towards that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So one of the things you want to do is work from the customer backwards. So go see your customer reviews of your competitors. If your product's already in the market, look at your customer reviews. What are common problems and common themes of issues you find? And then how can you test against it? If it's items missing, then yeah, let's count all the items, all the parts, make sure everything's there, and all the units that we check. If the product keeps breaking, maybe it's a non-stick pan and the non-stick coating keeps coming out when they wash it for the first time, then maybe have an inspector wash it for the first time at the factory. Maybe take 5 units, scrape it up with some steel wool, make sure the non-stick coating doesn't come off, So look at what defects and problems your customer has and think of how you would test them if you personally had your products, or if you had a sample shipped of that product to your home, how would you check it? And the second thing that I highly recommend is actually talking with your factories, because in the negotiation phase, all the factories, when you're sourcing, they all want you to choose them, to work with them. So ask every supplier that you order samples from, and maybe it's 15 suppliers, ask every single supplier and tell them, hey, what do you do for quality control in your production line? How do you properly do quality control? What tests do you do? Do you have any machines in your lab that you use to test the products during production to make sure they're built properly? What do you do? What are the specs of those tests? Lay them out for me. And the factories are going to give you the best specs possible because they want you to choose their company. So they can be like, we do this, we do this, we do this, we do this. Dive in a little bit deeper, get a little specific, and then boom, you've now had 15 suppliers that manufacture this as a business. That's their livelihood. You've had all of them come to you and tell you, hey, these are everything we do. Compile it, aggregate it, and now you got your whole checklist. This is what I want to check on my product, regardless of the manufacturer I work with, and these are the machines I should be looking for. That the supplier should have, and make sure they have those machines, because they don't have those quality control machines and another supplier does. Big indication that that supplier probably doesn't know the quality of their own products that they're making because they don't have any ways to check them.
Awesome. And you made me think of another thing there is that all of you watching would have done review research in, how do I build this product out? What do customers love? What do customers hate? What are the problems the customers are also facing? So from that, you can actually use that same research on top of what Sajag just mentioned to have those checks done on those aspects. It might be, let's say it's like glass jars with a certain hinge for opening the jar, and that hinge is always loose or really difficult to open and close, or maybe becomes detached. Those are things you could check. Or maybe when it's put in the washing machine, it comes apart. Those are things you're going to find in reviews and that an inspector could also check for you. So Jacques, what do you have to say about things like fraud and bribery? These are, terms thrown out in a lot of industries, but specifically with sourcing from China and what you've seen there with manufacturers, trading companies, how does that come into effect, and how does MOVLEY help kind of negate those problems?
That's a really good question. So when it comes down to fraud and bribery, a lot of people have this misconception that fraud and bribery is like the zero-sum game. So you give X, you get back Y kind of thing. And that's really not the case. So I'll give you a brief example of the story. So I went to the local foot doctor here. It's some fancy medical name. I don't remember it, but I went to the foot doctor here and I had flat feet. So I met him for the first time and I talked to him. We had a pretty good conversation, 10, 15 minutes. He liked me, I liked him, very chill conversation. And then after that, he said, hey, Sajag, the reason you're having this shin pain is you have flat feet. You need these orthotics in your shoe. Stay right here, I'll be right back. 2 minutes later, he came back with these brand new orthotics. He's like, these are a $50 set of orthotics. Try them on. I want you to see how they go. And I tried them on and I'm like, yeah, this is good. But he's like, yeah, you need to wear these and this will fix your problem. Just put these on and you can take these. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And then he's like, all right, Sajag, I'm going to go ahead and do you a favor. I'm going to give you these orthotics for free because I like you. And I was like, oh, well, awesome. Thank you. That's great. And then 2 minutes later, he had a nurse walk in and he introduced me. He's like, Sajag, this is a nurse. I need you to follow her out the back entrance because she's going to take you out a different way because they don't like me giving away shit for free. And I was like, oh, it's just orthotics. I'll pay for it. It's not a big deal. And he's like, no, I insist. You're not going to get out of here without taking that for free. What's an extra $50 orthotic to this $1 billion hospital group I work for, essentially? And that's kind of the same thing that happens with fraud and bribery in China. So an inspector goes to the factory rep treats him really nice, buys him lunch, super respectful, and then says, hey, inspector, I know this inspection is going to fail by 5%, 5% extra defects, maybe the limit is 6%, it's going to be at 11%. But if you don't pass this order, my entire job is gone. And then the inspector might think, okay, hey, this person here is going to lose their job. But what's an extra 5% defect rate to this billion-dollar American company that is buying these products? What's the big deal? It's nothing. I'd rather save this guy his job because he was nice to me. So that's kind of the same thing that happens in inspections. So what needs to happen is that the whole process of inspection has to be humanized. And there's kind of three main things that we do at MOVLEY to humanize that. First of all, we try to break down the silo between the client and the inspector, because the inspector has to understand that these are not like billion-dollar companies. You know, if you're an Amazon seller, whether you're doing 100 million or you're doing even just 100K, it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, it's still a business and this is your livelihood. So what we always tell inspectors is that a lot of the companies we work with that, you know, you obviously may not know which company is big, which company is large, but a lot of the companies you work with and we do product inspections for, they're very small companies. So these are people that spent all their money, maybe borrowed money from their friends, their family, took money from their parents, maybe their life savings, sold their car to start this business and, you know, invest in it. And then they trusted you to do an inspection. And when you pass a defective batch of products, even if it's by 2%, sometimes that 2% threshold is enough to flip the switch on Amazon, to get too many negative reviews to sell your product. Maybe if you're selling to a third party, maybe a B2B, that's enough to get the whole order rejected. So we tell the inspector that you know, that 2% difference or 1% difference is enough to get the whole order rejected. And you're not affecting some billion-dollar company that's going to lose money. You're affecting an individual who's going to have to go back to their friends, their family, say, hey, I lost all the money you lent me. Hey, mom, you know, dad, I lost $100,000, your entire life savings, whatever it is. So we give that to the inspectors and we tell them that. Now, the thing is that the inspectors resonate with that. They take a lot more pride in their work. So the second thing we do is we hire inspectors that take pride in their work. So when they go through our training modules, they take even more pride in what they do. But the third thing is, if you don't enable the inspectors to do a good job from a management point of view, all that training is useless. And you know, whether you're doing paper cups or you're doing like more complex stuff, you want to make sure your products, you know, they truly care about what you're manufacturing. So the third thing we do for inspectors, which is the reason we bill on the basis of time and we improve our time codes based on the industry, based on your product every inspection, is we want to make sure the inspector has enough time to properly inspect the products. Because if they don't have enough time to inspect, then, you know, you give them a 12-hour inspection to do in 8 hours, then they're not going to care about your products. They're like, the management doesn't care to even give me enough time to inspect these products well. Why the hell should I inspect these products well? And then that goes down from not even doing an 8-hour inspection to maybe doing a 3-hour inspection, because, you know, they don't frankly care about your products. So it has to be perpetuated throughout the whole experience. And then obviously there's protocols, there's processes, procedures to keep the inspectors on track. You know, we send multiple inspectors whenever possible. We have a tech platform with data analytics so we can track inspectors, see how well they're doing, help them improve, and, you know, make sure there's a process in place. So there's checks and balances too to that system, but the whole process has to be humanized. And that's what really makes MOVLEY super different when it comes to doing inspections.
I love that. And I can tell, you know, you're a seller who's moved into this space, because that's a lot of the time how people start, you know, with their savings. They've been working and saving for a couple months. It's often quite a big deal, especially in the beginning on those first orders. So I love that that's kind of ingrained in your corporate culture. I can tell, which I think is very cool, and a lot of sellers will appreciate. And then, Sajag, just your last advice for the sellers watching, or things you think we've missed that people need to know, and just overall what you would suggest to sellers who are concerned with manufacturing in China, or having inspections done, or just generally getting what they've paid for. Just your last advice on that.
Yeah, this is a really good question. So my general advice is that, you know, when it comes down to manufacturing in China, it comes down to two things. And first of all, the biggest thing is choosing a good supplier. So, you know, we were talking about the NNN agreements, relationship trust. You don't want to promise exclusivity to a manufacturer that you can't work with long term. So understand the factories, make that first choice with the factory you work with. It's not like a quick thing like, hey, I'm going to choose this supplier, I'm going to work with another supplier after a few orders, another supplier, or I'm going to change my supplier when I get bigger. Work with a supplier that you can grow with, and work and create a relationship and a partnership with them. Because the longer that relationship and the partnership goes, the better it is for both of you, and the better terms, the better relationship you're going to build. So that I can't stress enough. The second thing is that set expectations from the onset. So, you know, when you start a relationship, you build a partnership with the factory, and you know, you don't do inspections, and then 3 orders down the line, you have problems, you start doing inspections. It's going to kind of hamper your relationship a little bit. So set expectations from the get-go as much as possible, and start it early. So if you've not been doing inspections, start doing inspections. And if that's like inspections are a basic thing. Every major company does it. You should be doing it too, and do that from your order number one. So tell your suppliers, hey, we're going to be doing inspections, and set the expectations. So then the supplier understands that, yes, we want to build a relationship, we want to have a partnership, but there is a process. And similar to how they follow processes in their manufacturing production, you also have to follow a process in your supply chain. It's not just a, very, freely kind of operating rules. You have an operating cadence, and that cadence is applied to every single order, and it goes through that same process. So make sure that there's accountability, establish that accountability, and then partner with a really good supplier or a couple of suppliers, and you can do really, really well when it comes to Chinese manufacturing.
I agree. And on this, if you're doing an inspection as well, the big thing I find is sellers don't want to do the inspection because of cost. But even with MOVLEY, which is one of the better inspection companies, you can see that it's going to cost you about 30 cents a unit if you have a one-day inspection. So it does depend on the degree of complexity there. But a one-day inspection with MOVLEY is going to cost you about 30 cents a unit if you're doing like 1,000 units, let's say. If it's 2 days, then it's going to be 60 cents a unit. And so you might want to actually add that into manufacturing costs when you're doing profitability analysis, as we've covered multiple times, but it's something worth including because you don't want to end up with an order in the US, which now needs to be fixed, which is something I actually have right now. That's a huge problem because now, it's going to be shipped all the way back if it can't be fixed in the US, which it looks like it cannot. So I really recommend this. But Sajag, I just want to say thank you so much for being on again. I hope all of you watching loved the content we gave you today. Remember, check out MOVLEY below in the description. There's a link there for you. But if you did enjoy this content, please drop us a quick like. Share this video. If you know someone else who needs an inspection or hasn't done their inspection or is interested in this, definitely share this with them. Remember to subscribe, turn on those bell notifications as well. That way you're never going to miss an upload. But until next time, I hope you guys keep well, and I will see you in the next video.